Are you ready? We're going to be talking about drums and resilience with renowned drummer and educator Alex Cohen. He's here to speak to us about experience with both and a heck of a lot more. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Diane. Well, if I may call you that, or
I would hope.
okay, excellent.
Okay. Drumming.
Trying to
How'd
be
you
polite.
become a drummer? What'd your parents think when you started banging on things growing up?
Well, this is a story of. So I started playing when I was 12, about that, and it was mostly because I was this bullied kid in middle school, and I thought there was this cool kid who played drums, and I thought, well, if I play drums like him, maybe I'll be cool. No, well, I wasn't cool then. It didn't work, because I was just terrible to start at to get going. I have zero natural talent at it, and he. I wasn't cool then. I mean, I'm still not cool now, but at least it's more tolerable. I'm in a
Just
field.
that statement makes you cool.
Real okay. I'm in a field where it's a little more tolerable to be a nerd or be a dweeb. So it's funny enough. One of my best friends is I joke that it's like the dweeb and the guy who would slam him in the lockers because he forgot their differences. So, but okay, so I started at 12, and my parents got me this little Casio pad,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to play it so much I broke the pad. So they got me another pad. I broke that one, and they finally got me an electronic drum set, and it was it was a cheap one, but it still served its purpose. And I really practiced diligently. Look, my first teacher literally went to my dad, and he's like, man, this kid just doesn't have it. He's basically kind of a zero. He was basically just saying, like, this kid is learning disabled and kind of a zero. And basically. And so that was my start. It wasn't like I was born to do this, or I was. In fact, I tell people the most natural ability that I've had at this has been in the past 2 years since the seizure and the brain tumor. And that's
Okay, so let's talk about that a second. At some point, you had a seizure and it led to brain surgery?
yes. So what ended up happening, well, just to preface this, my dad he died almost 10 years ago of brain cancer. It
Mm-hmm.
was a meningioma, which is usually a benign tumor, but his was a fluke, and it went malignant. And if you have a meningioma that goes malignant, there is no treatment for it. There is still no treatment for it today. There's more treatment for glioblastoma, which is the most deadly one, or considered one of them. And there's more treatment for that than there is a malignant meningioma. It's plain and simply, it's you have 2 years, a year and a half, and it's over. So, I mean, that was always fresh in my mind. So I was
Uh-huh.
about to drive a car. I was going to drive out to see my hero, who I had met the year before. His name is Virgil Donati, and I was about to drive a car out to Long Island to see him. And like a second before I'm about to press the accelerator, suddenly these lights start flashing. It basically was like, it's like descending, and it feels like these pulsating lights almost. And I had been having them before, but I just kind of chalked them up to auras. In fact, at one point, I was advised that it probably was too much caffeine because I was drinking, espresso and a lot of coffee. And so it was chalked up to that, and it was not. So what ended up, and again, most of the time, you don't think brain tumor. You just think, oh, maybe their auras, like what a lot of people
Right.
have. And
Like a
so
quiet migraine or something.
precisely, this was different. So literally a second before I'm about to drive, suddenly these lights begin to happen. And the guy who saved me was sitting next to me. It was in the car. He basically held me against the seat while the seizure happened. It was a full body seizure, and his son was sitting behind me and held my head because I was seizing so much. My head was about to smash into the steering wheel. So we didn't drive. And the funny thing is, my dad's favorite band was Nightwish, and the drummer who saved me was the drummer from Nightwish.
Just got goosebumps. In that split second, all over my arms have goosebumps.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, he saved me. But he saved his son, my saved his my dad's son's life, basically. So we go to the ER, and I had to wait 4 hours for a CT scan and another 4 because there was only one working MRI machine for some reason for an MRI. And you're sitting there not even knowing what's going on,
Right.
what you have. So I'm waiting. There were so many parts, like I said, were the worst days or hours of my life thus far. I hope it doesn't get worse than this, but I finally get the MRI, and then it takes them 2 hours to diagnose. So, like, there's definitely swelling in your brain, a lot of it, but there's we need to do an MRI to find it. So I'm waiting in this room with these doctors who had very kind of poor bedside manner. Basically they're like, well, we don't know what it is.
Hmm.
Finally, the results come in and they're like, it's a tumor. And that was just it. It wasn't like, I'm sorry to say this, you should know. It was just, it's a tumor. Yeah. Thanks a lot. So
Yeah.
it anyway, I mean, nothing can prepare you for that moment where, especially 10 years after when my dad died,
Right.
you're reliving this nightmare. And
I can't imagine. I can't. I
and
don't think anyone could imagine that one.
it really is one of those things where I just, it's the world falls away. The floor drops out from under you, especially because the most common brain cancer is glioblastoma.
Hmm.
And glioblastoma is virtually a death sentence. Most people, the average survival is 18 months. The tumor literally grows. It's evil. It
Hmm.
literally sends out microscopic pieces of itself deep into the brain so it can reform. If you remove it, it could just start growing again. And it literally rewires your brain to feed itself. And then as it grows, it just dismantles your brain piece by piece. Now, here's the other very unusual part. So, my mother, who has really been wonderful during this. Again, it takes so much time and so much effort to go through this. You need the support. So she's just sending. We didn't know where to go. I mean, what do you say? We didn't know who to contact. So my mom just sends out messages to people she knew, and I mean, saying like, what am I supposed to do? My son has this brain tumor. And I had a friend, his name was Owen Strong when I was a kid. I didn't have many friends, but being the dweeb, I didn't have many friends. But this guy was always very kind. He looked out for me from bullies on the playground. He was very selfless then. And my mom and Owen died in 2019 of glioblastoma. The tumor took him, that it just dismantled him. And he fought it so hard, but eventually it just took it. So Owen's parents get back to my mother and say, here's the info for the head guy at Duke, which is the best. Duke is the best when it comes to brain cancer and in general, just anything brain related. So here, here's the info for the head guy. And Owen's father got in contact with the guy and he goes, so just to let you know, you're going to make Alex your patient. So I literally get on the phone with this guy and he goes, get down here. We're going to diagnose this thing and get rid of it. So, I mean, you're spending days wondering, you don't know what it is. It was unbelievable. It was so brutal. And then I got down there and they're like, we have to biopsy it. So they had originally said it wasn't malignant. Well, or at least it was lower grade. Anything, pretty much all of them. They're basically malignant, but they just grow different. So they did the biopsy, and basically you have 2 weeks of not knowing what this is. So those are 2 of the worst weeks of your life. Funny enough, though, after the seizure, I spent like a day just in just horrible depression. I mean, what are you supposed to think? And then the next day, I just said, you know what? You hear the stories about people who get struck by lightning and can play the piano or speak Latin or stuff like that. Let's just see if something like this happened. And I sat down at the drums and suddenly I could do things that I never seen done, like play 2 tempos in one side of the body simultaneously.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was that was the tip of the iceberg. Just it was I could suddenly program in numbers that I was hearing. Most music most musicians don't really go past groupings of threes, sevens, fives against each other. Suddenly I was able to do 19s, 17s.
My goodness.
Yeah. So that was the silver lining to a horrible situation. But after that, so I was funny enough, all the videos I did then accumulated millions of views because of how abnormal this all was. Like I had a seizure, I have a brain tumor, and yet my life's work, what I've been working towards for years, is suddenly realized. And my best friend, his name is Kenny. He's a drummer in New York, and he came over to watch it. And he said, he's like, I started crying afterwards seeing some of that. Like that was everything you wanted. So through tragedy, through trauma, or like my life's work, I basically had a path to that.
That is just phenomenal.
It's a very interesting. I mean, it's I tell people, and I tell I've done several drum camps, and I was still teaching even through chemo. I was still teaching part time. I mean, I couldn't do it full time, obviously, but I was teaching part time. And even then, I said, look, I'm documenting all of this because if this is a one time thing, I do not wish this on anybody. I do not You should not have to lose half of your vision. You should not have to go through this brain surgery. You should not be taking chemo. But if this is a one time thing and it won't happen again, I'm documenting this so the world will know that it did happen. So I've documented everything. I took all the social media videos of me on a drum pad, of me doing all this stuff, working on it, and I compiled it all. And that was part of my third book, Rhythms of Resilience, was a whole downloadable compilation of all the social media videos, so you can see kind of the development of it and watch.
Now, I'm curious when you speak to those surgeons at Duke that did your brain surgery, removed this tumor for good, did you tell them what was happening with you drumming wise?
Which and again, I can say that basically I had this, and I go to the surgeons, and they said, now here's where it gets creepier because so 90% of the time when someone calls you and says it's not benign, this thing is malignant, it needs to go, and they said we don't know what the composition of this tumor, and the biopsy was inconclusive. They're like, we haven't seen, this thing is so weird in its makeup and how it and what we're finding in it. It was like it was its like ecosystem of just everything awful, and they couldn't give it a name. They're like, we wish we could give it a name, but we don't know right. So the one they say that the one you want is called an oligodendroglioma, and it's just this rare brain tumor that just responds really well to treatment. I quote one of the fellow survivors from Reddit, more a kick in the ass than anything else. So that's the one you want. If you hear this, I mean, an awful situation, you probably want that one, but it's like a 1% chance you have that one. So I guess if you want to hear the real, I mean, I had a friend who did seances.
Hmm.
I'm like, if you can reach my dad, can you talk to? And I'm never I never believe like again, this was so bizarre. But when you're in that place, you don't everything you believe just like gone.
Exactly.
What,
You know,
what
I always said there are no atheists in foxholes. I believe that wholeheartedly. When you are in a life and death situation, how your
anything
mind
goes.
opens up is incredible. Opens up to new possibilities and what can happen and what's an alternative. So it doesn't surprise me you did that. Did you
I
get
mean,
any good answers?
so she goes, okay, I'll go. And she comes back and she goes, I have a message from your dad. And I'm like, I could really use to hear this. And she goes, you're not gonna die. This is not gonna kill you. You're gonna live a long, full life, but you have to get through this. You're gonna help people and maybe some other surprises. So I'm like, I don't know if this is real. I don't know. But this is what I'm going into surgery with because they were like, you want to take this thing out? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. And they couldn't tell me if it was a glioblastoma or not. Because quite frankly, if it's a glioblastoma, I was like, do I want to fight this? Like, I saw what went down with Owen. I saw what happened with my dad. I don't want to get this. So there was this 1% chance that it was an oligodendroglioma that was the one that could be, they said, like, we can target this thing and we can absolutely nail it. And so, and again, in this message, he said, you're going to have to monitor this thing for the rest of your life, but it's not going to kill you. So on that, I took a leap of faith and said, all right, I'm going into surgery. And my doctor said to me when I got there, he's like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if this will affect the drug. And he's like, I don't know. Do you still want to go through with this? This was going to kill me otherwise. And I said, yeah, I'm going to die. If so, let's go. Leap of faith. I remember what my dad said. What my dad said, like, it was so unreal, the whole experience. But again, when you're going through this, you're just reaching for anything you can find. And when you're faced with something like so, I went into the surgery and I go, knock me out. Let's go. So I wake up the next after the surgery, and I mean, I like promptly projectile vomited on my mother
Mhm.
in the room with me, and she goes, "It's the oligo. You're gonna live." My dad was right. So
Mm.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
Wow.
yes, it was unreal. It was something like, it was so crazy. So I went to
Now,
surgery.
I'm curious. You realize this is better than expected. How quickly did you ask for a drum pad, Alex?
Very fast. Well, I tapped. I was able to tap, kind of on my legs.
Yeah.
And I had my sister-in-law film me at the time, and I could still do it. I could still tap the numbers. And it like, even in the ICU, like, I'm attached to, so there's a video of me playing in the ICU where I could tap the numbers. And yeah, that was the first video. And these videos were getting like millions of views of just the journey through this. So then it was a month of radiation. And again, I lost part of my vision, similar to you losing your ear. I lost my right peripheral vision. So I was having to deal with that and going through radiation and chemo. And chemo was, again, when they say this type of chemo is tolerable, which it was pill form, it wasn't, an IV or anything, but it was pill form. Tolerable and fine are two very different.
Yeah.
So it was brutal. It was just,
Mhm.
it was an assault on my brain,
Mhm.
and a lot of family drama happened during that too. It was just, if I can say what is the worst year of my life, and I hope it is never as bad. I hope I never have a year like this, but just everything bad that could happen seemed to happen. But my uncle died of pancreatic cancer.
Mhm.
Just, yeah, it's horrible. And
But you got a lot behind you. And
yeah,
you got interesting info from your dad. You got these new drumming rhythms that heretofore were non-existent to you,
no, they were non-existent to the world of drums, is what
to the
was.
world.
Yeah, I mean, no one had ever played stuff like that. There was one other guy, but he had passed away. I never got to speak, but it was certainly on a level, I think, even past him. Even the most considered the most technically advanced drummers on the planet couldn't even comprehend. And it was just that advanced. And so, I wrote about it in the book, but at the same time, just after going through that for a year, and yet certainly getting that kick in the ass, as chemo ends and the months go by and my brain is kind of returning. I mean, I still have moments where I'll brain fog. It's still, I think it takes about a year before people say you feel back. It's getting better, but I still, feel that, and still get those moments. But during that time, I said, I need to find a place to live. I need to move. I need to start a new chapter of my life, because
Mhm.
I was I was given another shot at this, and not like I'm gonna let it pass me by or not take advantage of it. So I found a wonderful place, and had 5 months applying for it, because I know, the New York City co-op, and just the applications and all that are very tough, especially as a drummer, because it's hard to, we all think drummers are just loud noise, but I promise we're not. So I found a great place. It's the apartment of my dreams, and so here I am to explore.
Now I'm
And
curious, how would you describe life pre brain tumor, life post brain tumor as far as your music and your passion for that music and drumming?
Well,
Are you still playing the same kind of music? Did your interest in particular genres shift in any way?
mm, I mean, I still was just kind of playing whatever people called me to play. I mean, it
Mhm,
really depended, but I think the stuff I was practicing and what I was working on changed because
mhm.
a lot of it was so before that. I mean, I was traveling all the time. And again, I had just won that Drumeo, one of the Drumeo awards, the kind of Modern Genius Awards. I had gotten that. I had that appearance on there. I had just gotten all the endorsements from my favorite companies. I was flying high. I felt
Yeah.
like going in a good direction. And of course, that all blew up once this showed up, once my unwelcome visitor showed up. But that was
Glad to see you kept your sense of humor. Or maybe you gained one since I didn't know you before this, but you
I
certainly
know
have a good one.
I always tell. I mean, I've told students. I'm like, look, someone with half a brain should be able to get this, like me, literally. I mean, the thing was big. They had to remove like a quarter of my brain. I'm lucky that my I still have all my reflexes and still have all the fast twitch that I need for playing drums, but I still, again, like quarter of my brain. The thing was huge. This wasn't a small. Now, funny enough, I've always had an affinity for kind of cosmic horror. That's always been my, Cthulhu was always my. It just kind of was my. I described it in the book as like the kind of central character or villain in the story. Just it was sort of symbolized everything that went wrong in life. Sure enough, I look at the brain tumor scan. You could trace the face in there. It literally the nurses couldn't believe it when I showed them the comparison. Even the doctor said they never seen a brain tumor look like that. You see the face. You see what it looks like.
Okay, that's a trip.
Yeah, it's like every other
There are
moment.
a lot of trips in this story
Yeah,
that are like, wow.
let me be very clear. The story felt like a really dark fairy tale in some ways, and it just it's crazy to say this and just talk about it. But I know, I knew you'd appreciate this from a kind of a wellness perspective and also a mental
Mhm,
health perspective. That this all played a lot of a role in sort of the my trajectory through getting through this because it was so difficult. And I said, you know what though, my dad had 5 brain surgeries to try and stick around for his family. The least I can do is get one and deal with this. So I did, and I'm still here 2 years after the seizure. And the doctor said, my neuro oncologist said, the likelihood of this thing coming back anytime soon is very low.
well, on that very great note, let's talk about your drumming.
Please?
You are known as a foremost drummer. You educate people on drumming.
I do.
You've won awards for your drumming. What is it about your drumming that makes you different than other drummers? How do you get to your status on drumming? Obviously, a lot of practice.
Yeah, it was
Said
practice.
it wasn't natural talent, which I'm not
No,
100%
absolutely.
right.
This is why, and I'll say not to sound arrogant, but this is why I think I'm a really good teacher was because I had to do it from the ground up, step by step,
Uh-huh.
and guide a student step by step up the developmental process. A lot of the problem when you have, and this just goes for music in general, when you have players who are really naturally gifted at their instruments, they don't know how to teach because they never really had to work at it. For example, if you have a pianist who has perfect pitch, how are you going to teach someone ear training to hear chords on a piano or hear accompaniment when you have perfect pitch? You never had to work at that.
Mhm.
And it's a similar thing, I think, with drums. There's certain people who have certain fast twitch reflexes. They're coordinated. They have certain makeups in terms of just their mental alignment or something. It's just they don't they don't really teach well in that sense because this just came easy for them. Whereas for me, it didn't, and it was just more time than any than
Mhm.
I mean, I spent 12 years, 13 years, like 6 to 8 hours a day in that range working on this. So that was what I think really started to separate my stuff and
Mhm.
really start. People kind of took the wrong things in some ways. I feel like I got really known for double bass, which is your foot technique, both the
Mhm.
people got to that was kind of what I became known for, even though I didn't really practice it that much. It was kind of something that I developed because I was always fascinated with symmetry and I wanted
Mm-hmm.
all limbs to be equal, which is again, I think so. I always describe myself as a frustrated piano player, kind of got small hands and my fingers are kind of, fat and stubby. So it just was kind of one of those things where I wanted to approach the drum set like an organ or a piano. And in order to do that, you really had to really be very ambidextrous. You really had to have your feet kind of matching your hands in order to get that type of sound where you could really orchestrate that way. So, I mean, in technical terms, I would say like really layering different time signatures over each other and really getting my feet to do what my hands did. So honestly, it was kind of accidental that I developed this stuff. And at the time I was doing a lot more metal than, playing a lot of metal at the time. And so you had to have fast double bass, otherwise you were shown the door really quick. And that was just part of like the culture I grew up in. It was just
Mm-hmm.
what you needed. And so I really developed that stuff kind of by accident. And then one day I was on a call with a guy who I really admired as a kid, a drummer whose name is Pete Drummond, ironically. He's in Australia. And
Good name.
yeah, right. And he's fantastic. He's just amazing. And so he watched some of it, and he's like, "You do realize that is abnormal. How did you develop that?" And I'm like, "I really don't know." So I spent a while kind of reverse engineering the technique a
Mm-hmm.
little bit and kind of breaking it down and doing a lot of videos and stuff on it, which was social media. And I documented everything. I mean, I must have like 3,000 videos on the combination of Facebook and Instagram. And
Well, what always amazes me with drummers is that, if you're lucky, you've got two hands and 2 feet. And drummers are taking those four body parts and moving them completely differently off it, doing different things with each of them and keeping timing and keeping that backbone. To me, it's the most essential part of a song. I mean, I always zoom in on the drum work, and that's what I notice. And I really notice it now with my hearing different. I can pick up drums anywhere.
I
It's
mean,
really
yeah,
bad.
look,
And I miss the guitars now. I like don't hear them when I'm listening to the radio. But
it's really refreshing to hear that because most of the time no one cares about us. We're just
I love the drums, and my next would be a bass because it's just the backbone.
amazing.
And those, to me, you could listen to any song. If you remove them, it's just missing everything. But it's also the fascination of drummers that you're doing all these different things. I mean, if I could get my feet into the picture, I would. They're all going in different directions and it's pulling together.
So there's a little bit. So, okay, most drummers, they usually think on two planes. You have like your hands, your feet. So I call those planes because that's usually most drummers are not independent. In fact, I'd say at this point, independence in drumming is at a fairly low point because a lot of people don't, in the age of social media, that's just kind of gone to the back burner for flashiness and just kind of tricks. But there are people who are doing when I talk planes, I mean your hands, your feet. That's a plane to me. But the way I see it is, drumming is an asterisk. Most people learn top to bottom, but you have your feet to your hands. You have your right side to your left side. You have your left side to your right side. You have your right hand to your left foot, and you have your left hand to your right foot. And that to me is the complete way of seeing the instrument. And that was something that I only unlocked on that level after the seizure.
Wow.
Yeah. So
It's hard to make me speechless, but you keep doing it, Alex. Nobody in my house would say, oh, she gets speechless easily, but you're doing it. Wow.
so
Well, it's just fascinating. And now where do you take this? You have this new heavenly, unearthly, we won't call it abnormal, unusual.
please. Like abnormal has kind of been the word I would use to describe everything over the past couple years. So
It's like
absolutely.
this gift, but you need to now nurture it. You need to
Yeah.
keep feeding it.
That's what I've
You
been
got to
doing.
feed the beast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, literally, I mean, the Cthulhu face, it definitely felt like, so I felt like literally I had gotten alien knowledge or Eldritch knowledge. So yeah, it was so crazy. Just everything about it. I'm like, how is this real? Just everything about it was so crazy. And so, well, what ended up happening though was I was able to think. So I can think on, whereas most drummers think on two rhythmic planes, I can think on like five, because I can think of four separately and then orchestration, which is a fifth. And orchestration, that means movement of your limbs, not just doing it on one surface. It means, actually orchestrating and that type of coordination. So that's it. Those are five different planes separately.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was just in the past 2 years. The most naturally I've ever gotten this, ever, past 2 years.
Now, okay, so how do you, when you, oh wow, I don't even know how to ask the question because this is so wild to me. So you now have this new ability to drum. You're drumming differently than you've ever drummed. Could you go from the processing of it to verbalizing it? Like to understand it? Like, do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yes.
That wasn't a very articulate question, but because I'm trying to grasp this as it's a miracle.
It is in many ways. I should not be alive right now, let alone functioning.
Playing better than ever in a
Yeah,
plane that no one's ever played.
yeah, and also just having my having my functions. Like most people, when they go through this stuff with a tumor of that size, people lose control of their left side.
Yeah,
People are in a wheelchair,
yeah.
and I lost this part of my vision, but which is why I wear these glasses. But
I
physically,
mean,
like,
that's how I ended up deaf. I mean, it was a head bang.
yeah,
So a tumor, cutting out a tumor is a lot more than a head bang. So
yeah,
it's a miracle. It's miraculous to me.
yeah.
And that this other thing happened.
There's that too. And granted, I mean, I could have literally had all of my drumming gone and sounded, yeah, I mean, and just not been able to play. And so I am still able to do everything that I saw myself do pre-surgery. And so when I mean nurturing and developing it, it's one of those things where you kind of have to quantify it for
Mhm.
the kind of the layman's perspective. And
Yeah.
one of the ways I was able to quantify it was relating it to classical music. So when I was when I was recovering from the surgery, my oral stimulation and my vision were so impacted and so swollen that I could really only listen to classical music, like classical music. So, the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven,
Yeah.
Chopin, the Bach preludes, Goldberg variations, classical piano.
That's a bit of a shift from heavy metal.
Well, I mean, I have a degree in jazz performance. So like I went to, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, I got it from NYU. So I've got a lot of, formal training. And
Yes.
so I do have that. I'm not just an idiot
No,
hit.
no, no. You can never say just. I mean, I'm the mother of a skateboarder. And when someone says, "Oh, he skateboards," I'm like, "Yeah." And
Yeah,
I
awesome.
challenge anyone in the world to try to do some of the things he does. So please never use the word just with
I
anyone in
appreciate
my
that.
life.
Okay, excellent. I'm really glad to hear that. So yeah, it ended up like I was relating it to classical music in the sense that a lot of classical music, a pianist could really like let their left hand drift off or their right hand
Yeah.
from each other. And you really hear it in a lot of these pieces where it feels like it's very much coming apart and they're hearing this very elastic phrasing. And so it's very similar to that to me. And that was kind of how I was trying to describe it. And then basically I was able to just say, look, if you put 19 tuplets against 6 beats, you're going to get something along the lines of this. And then I came up with this thing called the drift, which was the ability to kind of phase in and out. So it's called phasing. And it was based off of Steve Reich piano phase, which actually one of my things was I was able to play piano phase on drums by displacing one of the rhythms, pushing it by a note. Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty,
Now, Alex, when people started to hear this new advent's a good word for this. This new advent of drumming that was coming from you on some cerebral, spiritual level, because it's kind of a bit of both. Your father's component and your brain component. You know,
I
you've got this
can't
real
believe I
spiritual,
say that.
cerebral thing happening.
I still can't believe I say that, and again, I feel more comfortable opening up about it because I believe that sometimes people who go through this stuff and feel like there's no way back, sometimes or there's no way forward, sometimes you find it in the most unusual of places. I know for me, I did, and something.
Now, when people who, let's say, were your students or fellow drummers or people who saw a video you put out online, what's the reaction? Like, is it like, how the heck?
Yeah,
Or where the hell did this come from?
yeah, that's
Literally
exactly.
from hell, we could say,
Yes,
or maybe a bit of heaven.
okay, you know what? I'll say like eldritch knowledge. Okay, so fine. It came from the cosmos or something. You know, that was kind of what we always joked with. Like I had gotten the knowledge of the cosmos, it was the eldritch knowledge of rhythm. So I called them eldritch rhythms basically because that's what they were. They were these like they were just sort of this like they were just these like so abnormal sounding phrases, and so a lot of people couldn't really believe it when they saw it. In fact, Kai, the drummer who saved me, he's like, I was like laughing at some of them. It's so unbelievable to watch. And so a lot of them, a lot of it just became like, what could I do with this stuff? And it was more like, then there were things like if I couldn't do something, I could usually figure it out like in a couple minutes, which was, again, very unusual. So yeah, people were just, I think, pretty taken aback by the level that had just jump and also that someone could do stuff like this. And there was only really one person that had really this guy Pete Zeldman that had really come close, or I should say was like doing similar stuff, and he had passed away. And so it was one of those things where people hadn't seen this. And so I've really tried to take it and make it into more of a musical setting, and that's in that sense. So that's been something I've been working on right now, is turning it into something that's a little more palatable as a phrase or getting comfortable with that. And that's quite difficult in and of itself. So
Mm.
really taking this stuff and saying like, hey, I could maybe fit, like I can fit this in a song and it would work. It's happening now because it's more like I'm trying to speak a language. Usually what I say,
Mhm.
very complicated language, but it's still a language. And
And that's an interesting point because you can speak a language and it is a language. And I do believe music is a language because if you ever see a bunch of musicians get together, you're saying they're talking some language I don't know.
well,
And boy, they're having amazing conversation. I marvel at it. But when you're doing something differently now on a drum that's never been done before, can you count it verbally? Like,
yes,
can you you can.
I did talk over it.
You can.
I
Wow.
I can count each limb when I'm doing it. That's the thing to me. You really know you have something when it comes to something stuff on drums if you can count it and play.
Right. That's what I've heard people say. That's why I was wondering, can you merge those two together now? Holy
Yeah.
moly.
Yeah, and so basically where so when I when I teach students, and I really like I feel like I specialize in advanced teaching and advanced students. So a lot of my students are college students or pros who come to me for this type of information. I guess the eldritch knowledge, if I may say.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where I always say you've got to be able to count this stuff. As far as I'm convinced, the other, and again, you have to be able to count it, and you also need to accept that you're gonna hate yourself for a long time when you're learning this stuff. And again, here's where the misnomer kind of ended up was people think that I had a brain tumor and suddenly I was just suddenly could do all this. And the truth was I had put in a lot of work before the brain tumor. Okay,
Of
maybe
course.
big jump, but I still put in the prerequisites to physically do this stuff.
Right. You know, one of my favorite things to say to people is nobody ever asks the next hot band on the radio how many dive bars they played before they got to the radio. Everyone seems to skip all that practice. I have such admiration for musicians because I'm a absolutely horrible self-taught guitar player. And the reason I stayed horrible is I just wasn't willing to commit the time that was necessary to even get to a decent level. So I really admire the amount of time when you said you were sitting alone for 6 to 8 hours. That is a compassionate and commitment. But I have a question for you as a follow-on to all this. You play in bands still, right? You play with others.
Getting back into it more, there was a year and a half where I'm not kidding you. I think I did a gig during chemo and I had to make the band move their set to 7 p.m. because I was so exhausted from the chemo and that learning sets of music was borderline impossible at that time. I just didn't have the focus or the mental capability. I mean, all I really could do was like practice and learn and develop this stuff, but learning music, bringing my gear out to a show, it just none of it. I couldn't. It just was so demanding. So I'm getting back more to doing that. Touring extensively.
Well, hold on. Before you get to that, what I'm trying to understand is you're playing all this different stuff. A drummer and a bass player are the backbone to any band. Have you had any bass players join you yet and said, wow, what the heck, Alex? How am I supposed to play with this?
Well, yes, but one of the things too, they're just like, dumb it down, man. Dumb it down. Yeah.
You're up here now, Alex. We used to groove. What the
Yeah.
heck are you
And
doing?
so
You're leaving me in the dust.
I will say this, and I always say I'll always tell people that think now the positive of learning these super advanced polymetrics and time signatures and just general technical stuff is you feel time really well, and your timing gets much tighter and more advanced. So I feel like I lock in with bass players now much better because I'm so aware of the micro phrases and how to hear where a certain bass is, where someone's
Wow.
quarter note is, or how they're feeling time, or where they play on in relation to the beat. Like some bass players play behind the beat, some play on it, some
Yeah.
play in front of it. I'm able to hear that much better than I used to. So that's the benefit of it. But a lot of the time I'm just like, guys, if we put this like, 23 over this, it could be really cool, right? And they're like, no, dude, no. Like, stop.
You're sending them all back to school, Alex.
I wouldn't say that. I've started, sometimes it is too much and I get that. So usually now it's just kind of for my own, I should say my kind of own development or stuff. Like I've got an idea of writing like I've kept saying this for a long time, but of writing a bunch of like solo drum set pieces based off of hearing classical music when I was in recovery. And so I've thought of doing that. I definitely develop it for certain things, but playing with musicians, absolutely not one of them. And I make sure that every time I practice, I spend time working on fundamentals and much more of the applicable stuff too. And I feel like that makes it where my technique doesn't feel like I have to like, hey, check out this. It feels much more like, okay, if I put it in, that's cool. If they don't want it, that's totally fine too. And also recording myself more now, like doing more albums for people and stuff. Like I've started doing more of that, doing more albums. Like I can listen back to it, to the track, and just be like, that did not work. It just implying numbers over everything just is not. It doesn't. Part of me is like, oh, that's cool that I can do that, but then another part's like, dude, just like put it away. Just play the song, play the groove.
Hmm.
And that to me is something that I've been able to that's been kind of the part of this journey is figuring out that that's what you need to do. It comes back to that, regardless of just how much crazy stuff you could play, regardless of just how advanced you get, that's the backbone. That is what drummers are supposed to do. We're not supposed to monopolize. We are there to keep time and serve the music. And that I guess a lesson that once again was very reinforced over the past couple of years.
There is nothing like a good drum solo at any concert. Okay. I'm standing there waiting for the good drum solo personally, more than the guitar solo. But the drum solo totally gets me pumped up. But what a pleasure this has been, Alex. There are going to be everybody. I've been speaking with Alex Cohen. He is a thriver, a drum enthusiast, one of the top players in the world. He educates people on his extremely unusual awareness of drums and music. And there are going to be all kinds of links so you can follow this guy, because if you don't know him, you're going to want to. I promise you that. Super cool. I am so glad we met, Alex.
Yeah.
So Follow the links below. There are going to be all kinds of links to Alex, so you can follow his Instagram or anything else he shares with me. Hit subscribe. Alex and I are moving over to the green room. Alex, thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. Really appreciate this.
Hang on. Hit subscribe, everybody, and follow Alex.